BookTube. It's Gina, and I'm here on Tag Tuesday to do the book buying history tag. Now, this tag was created by Wiebke, and I was tagged by Brian at Bookish. And of course, I will link their channels below. This tag is right up my alley because it only has 2 questions. I'm looking at my notes here. And it is, where do I get my books and how do I choose the books I get? And you know, I love talking about my books and everything about them. So this is definitely the tag for me. So first, where I get my books. So I am indiscriminate about where I get my books. I buy books, I borrow books from the library, I get them on Kindle, I get them on paper. I love buying used books, so I do frequent the used bookstores in my area. Unfortunately, my favorite used bookstore closed down a few years ago. It was before COVID. They were a little tiny local store in a town near me, and it was a wonderful 100% used, independently owned store. They closed down, the owner retired, but I love those kinds of stores. The small, independent, just used bookstores are full of treasures. I love my Third Place Books here in the Seattle region, which is new books. It's an independent bookstore, but it's also got used books mixed in. I love Barnes & Noble. I probably shop there less than I do the others, but I do love Barnes & Noble. I also buy books online, so I use Book Depository, I use Amazon. I do read a lot of Kindle books, so I do buy Kindle books on Amazon, and I borrow books from the library. So I buy books all over the place. I love thrift stores. I went thrift storing for the very first time the other day and bought only one book at the Annie Dillard's Why I Write, and I'm just loving that book. It's wonderful. But back to the tag. So I buy books all over the place, and I will buy them wherever. I don't necessarily have a preference, but I do love used books. And question number 2 is, how do I choose the books I get? So I like to think of, when I buy books, that I am building a library. Now, of course, I buy random books. I'm not very strategic in my thinking about everything that I buy, but I do buy a lot of books to think about building a library of books that I will want to read in the future, books that I love, books that I'm going to learn something from. And I really got that idea from this book by Steve Leveen called The Little Guide to Your Well-Read Life. Not a well-read life, but your well-read life. And this book is just wonderful. I've had it for years and years and years. I revisit it every once in a while, but it's got really great pictures, and I love a good sketch. But it has chapters like Book Love Regained, Uncovering the Books That Will Change Your Life, Seizing More from Your Reading. And so I like to really think about ways that books are going to impact my life in this way, building a library. And one of the quotes from this is, unless a book is good for you, you won't connect with it and gain from it. Just as no one can tell you how to lead your life, no one can tell you what to read for your life. Do not set out to live a well-read life, but rather your well-read life. And in many ways, that's a tough lesson to learn. I think that there's a lot of books that we read because we think we should. I do think there's some value to that, though, too. So I think that we've talked about reading outside our comfort zones before, and pushing yourself to read books that are not in your normal wheelhouse. So I think that's still important, and I don't think that's what he is referring to. But I like to think of building my library in a very conscious way. So that's my first point, is thinking about buying books and what I'm going to keep, where I'm going to put them. At some point, I might do a bookshelf reorganization, because I don't know about you, but since I started BookTube, I pull books off my shelves because I want to talk about them, and then I'm popping them in random places. My books have never been that well organized, but I always know where they are because I put them there. But now that I'm pulling things down and I'm putting things back up, and they're not always landing in the same place, I realize I need to organize them a little bit. So I have what I consider a lovely library, but they're really not very organized at this point. So that is something I need to work on. So I do like to think about how books will fit into my library. I'm constantly weeding things out that no longer fit, or that I've read and know I won't get back to, because I have limited space like most of us. But I'm lucky that I do have some available space for bookshelves. So I've got these tall bookshelves, and there's these two, I'll tell you a little bit, two that are as tall as, well, they're about 7 feet tall. Here, I've got another one of these over there, and then I've got 3 more tall ones like this in our office. And so I've got a place for books, and I've also got some stacks. I like book stacks. They don't bother me to some extent. So I'm lucky that I have the place to put books. So the zero TBR concept is not for me. I don't have a desire to have a small TBR. I like having books around me. But that said, how do I actually pick the books that I'm going to read? So of course, now I get a lot of inspiration from BookTube, and I like to watch channels that have taste similar to mine to get ideas about books that maybe I haven't heard that are in my wheelhouse. But I also really like to watch channels that are outside of my wheelhouse, channels that read primarily things like horror, romance, things that I just generally don't read, because sometimes I do want to give other genres a try. And then for intellectual readers, I really like Brian's channel, so Bookish, who tagged me for this video. He reads very widely. He reads different types of books. He's reading, he did like a lot of books by First Nation, Indigenous people, by, I think he did Australian books for Aussie April. And those are books I generally just are not on my radar. And so I really like to get ideas from people who read things that are different from what I read, so that I can also get some ideas for things that I may not have thought of. And that's primarily nowadays where I get most of my ideas for books. I also like to get ideas for books from things like this. So this old paperback of Georgette Hayer's False Colors by Pan in the UK. I love these old paperbacks. Isn't that just a beautiful cover? I'm going to read this for Pastoral June, that is being hosted by Summer at Cozy Reading with Quaker Cats and Angie at Literary Labors. And this is a pastoral cover. It's beautiful. So I'm going to read it for that. But in the backs of these books, back in the old days, and I wish publishers still did this, you would find oftentimes a list of, like, they would put an order form in the back where you could order books. Of course, you can't use those order forms anymore. Sometimes I'm just tempted to fill it out and send it in, but I don't think those addresses even exist. But a lot of times in the backs of the books, they've got other authors that they publish or that they sell. And so I find a lot of authors I hadn't heard of by looking in the backs of these books of the, for authors. So for instance, in the back of this Georgette Heyer book, there are books by Daphne du Maurier, Susan Howatch, Constance Heaven. These are probably primarily romances. Phyllis Whitney, who, other than Daphne du Maurier, I have not ever heard of before. So that's a fun way. If I know I like an author and I want to find maybe similar strains or similar veins, I will check out some of these old books and the order forms and authors that are listed in the backs of them. And then I also love these books of essays about books. So this is Nick Hornby's The Polysyllabic Spree, and it is 14 essays that he printed in the that were printed in the Believer magazine. He's got all kinds of these essays, and I get lots of ideas reading other people's essays about books and seeing what they think of them. Nancy Pearl, here our beloved Nancy Pearl in Seattle, does a lot. She has a book called Book Lust that I thought I had, but I couldn't find. So I might need to buy that book again. But she's always getting book recommendations. She's got a TV channel here called Book Lust where she interviews authors. So I get a lot of ideas. I just bought a poetry book, as a matter of fact. I should have grabbed it from a poet that I have not read before, but I saw interviewed on her channel. But this Nick Hornby book is wonderful because he starts each essay with books bought, books read, and then of course the essay. And this one starts out, last month I was banging on about how books were better than anything, how just about any decent book you picked up would beat anything else, any film or painting or piece of music you cared to match it up with. Anyway, like most theories advanced in this column, it turned out to be utter rubbish. Which I love his sense of humor. He's very funny. And so I love these books of essays to get book ideas. And then, of course, I just browse. And I love to browse for books. So I will go to the library and browse. I will go to the bookstores and browse, and I buy cover buys. I buy things that look interesting to me. That's really fun to do at the thrift store. So I do that less often with new books because they're expensive, but I do a lot of thrift store browsing, and I have always got a mental TBR going on in my head of things that authors that I've heard about that if I see them for super cheap, I will pick up. And so that's a really fun way to get book ideas too. And then of course, I'm reading from my shelves. I have lots of books on my shelves that I want to read. And I love the idea that I could be holed up in my house for a year, never getting out, and still have things to read. That sounds familiar. So it's been a lot of fun thinking about books and buying books. I just love it. I am going to sign off for now, but I'll talk to you later. Oh, wait a minute. No, I forgot my tag. Who I want to tag. So I did want to tag people for this video, and two brand new booktubers. The first is Annika. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, at Inking Your Thinking. She just started her channel and has a couple videos, and she's delightful and charming, and I love the way that she talks about books. I hope you will check out her channel. Annika, consider yourself tagged. And then Elizabeth at Bookends and Books. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. She is a new booktuber, but she's had her channel for a long time, and it sounds like has not really posted anything. So she's fairly new, and she's a very intelligent reader, broad range of things that she likes. She's reading for the BookTube Prize right now. And so Elizabeth, you are also tagged. I would love to hear both of you talk about where you get your books and how you decide what to read. So now I will sign off, and thank you for watching.